I just had to wait to set up because the church service was just finishing. I figured that God is a hard act to follow. But it did remind me of a story. A young mother was having a problem with her two sons. It seems that they've been terrorizing the entire neighborhood with their mischief. And she didn't know what to do, but she was sitting down having a cup of coffee with a neighbor lady, telling her about all of her troubles. And the neighbor lady said, you know, I can't tell you what to do, but when my son was young, I had the same problem. So I made an appointment with that minister of the church down in the corner. And after he talked to him, I never had another problem. Well, not knowing what else to do, she made an appointment. The minister took the oldest boy into the office. And now tell me, young man, trying to put the fear of the Lord in him, where is God? The young boy didn't say anything, but he was quite startled. But so the minister again said, where is God? The young boy got up, he ran from the room, he grabbed his young brother and says, come on, we've got to get out of here. They've lost God and they're trying to pin it on us. You enter the front door, the windows in the house, again, were bought for the house in Belgium. Front doors are, and if I ask you, and if you know the answer, feel free to blurt it out. Anybody know what style the glass is in the front doors? And what time that makes it made? Art Nouveau, 1890 to 1910. So you'll see very curvy, graceful things, and you don't call it Victorian when you have it curvy like that, whereby the windows on the doors into the parlor are more Victorian, and they are typical of what you see European glass to be like. American doesn't make glass like that, because these flowers and designs were painted on the glass, and then the glass was put in the kiln and fired at 2,000 degrees for several hours, and then it was taken out and then put into the lead, where America typically uses just glass and bullseyes and bevels and things like that, as you'll see. But that's what it looks like, but it never changes color. So for 150 years from now, the color in the glass will look just like that. So when you look the other way into you see the archway. That is again typical of Art Nouveau, where you have the curving graceful. And the cabinet, again, the house was built for the cabinet. The top of the cabinet is within 2 inches of the ceiling. And the cabinet is again Art Nouveau, 1890 to 1910. And that's typical of what you see in France. So this was made in Paris just about 1896. Again, you see the curvy lines, cherubs and the cupids that are up at the top. Old Man Winter and gargoyles there. And the face on the front of the door, but very curvy, very graceful. And then next to that is a Louis XV credenza. You know the difference between a credenza and a sideboard? Money. Credenzas cost more because you got a fancier name. But they do the same thing, and of course you have marble because you can put heat on it. This is about 1860. And the painting, typical of a European young girl from the 1700s, guess how old that is? 1991. And you'll see these types of paintings all over the world these days. They're painted in China. And they're made as copies of typically of famous paintings. And you go to New Orleans, you'll see all kinds of them, and you go to a lot of the fancy big cities. If you want to have art and you don't want to spend the kind of money that originals are, you know, that's about an $800 painting. And it was painted by a master, but probably in China. And then when you look out the front window of the parlor, this is the kind of glass that was made in America. In fact, that was made in my hometown of Saginaw, Michigan. In fact, have you heard of the song Saginaw, Michigan? That was about back in the 60s. If you spell Saginaw backwards, it's Wanagass. Wanagass, they say, was a famous Indian chief, and that's how the Saginaw became to be, that they reversed the name. So I'm from Okemos, Michigan, and that's named after a Chippewa Indian chief. The kitchen is peach on oak. My wife wanted white, and I wanted wood. So the compromise was peach. But it never changes color either because of these 16 coats of hand-rubbed peach. But it's light. And here's the cane case with the canes in it. And those are all ivory. Somebody asked the question the other day, is ivory illegal? Well, no, ivory's not illegal. It's just it's illegal to bring it into this country. Used to be I just carried them on the plane. But today, you have to be much more careful of that. I also used to carry gun canes on the plane. I just walk on the plane with a gun. And they didn't care because they never had any problems. And after 2001, they did all kinds of things. So here's the most expensive cane I ever sold. It looks like you can see an umbrella or a cane handle sticking out of the end, and then it's a tapered tiger maple box, and inside is a violin, and actually plays. I was walking through the biggest antique show in the world in America was in Atlantic City, New Jersey. They had 1,600 dealers. That same show today is sick. They've got about 300 left, and it's probably on the way out. I walked through this booth and I saw that violin, but it didn't even occur to me that it was a cane. I walked down and the guy chased me down the aisle because he knew I collected canes. He said, "Did you see my violin cane?" And I said, "No." And I went back and I said, and he showed me, and I said, "Oh, I like that." I said, "How much do you want?" He says, $10,500. And I tried to negotiate. I said, "How about 10?" He says, "No." He wouldn't dicker one penny. And he wouldn't take a check. He didn't know where it was from, how old it was, or anything about it. But there was a name through that slot that I looked, or in the violin there, and I looked at that, and I liked it. So I bought it, and I paid him. I went to a bank, and I got cash advance from credit cards. And I paid him. And I took it home, and I enjoyed it for several years. And then one day I went to a cane convention, and there's a guy called Durow in New Orleans on Royal Street. Have you been to Royal, all those beautiful antique shops? Anyway, that's one of the fun places in the world to go in antique because they have such quality. And I told him about my cane, and he says, "Hey, send it to me." And he says, "Oh, by the way, how much is it?" And I said, "It's $20,000. He said, "Okay," so I sent it to him. He said, "How about 18,000? I says, "No, it's 20,000. And he sent me a check. So that was the most I ever made on one cane, but it didn't fit in my umbrella holder. It's about 10 inches in diameter, and that's why I sold it. But it was probably the best one. But typically what I deal in is what we call a gun cane. And this is a poacher's cane. And the handle, that hook handle, is a rhinoceros horn. And so a lot of these I sell to the Mideasterns who grind them up for an aphrodisiac. But this stock screws off, and they were typically used in England because all the land in England was owned by the royalty, and it was against the law to hunt on the king's land. And so they would put that stock in their jacket, and they would walk along, and when the game warden left and went by, they would take and put that stock on, and that collar that you see, that metal collar, turns, half turn, and a trigger drops down. And it's already cocked, it's already loaded, and you're able to shoot your game for the evening meal. If it doesn't have a stock, it was used for protection. But this one with the stock was typically used to eat with. The problem is that most of them are not in existence anymore because there was a tip in the end called a ferrule. And when you take that ferrule off, then your barrel is exposed. But if they forgot to take it off and that bullet went off accidentally, it would blow up and often kill the people. So most of these are not left. So anyway, I sold this particular gun cane for $2,500. And that would be typical of a cheap gun cane. If it has a 6-shot and a dagger or a pepper box, it might bring $10,000. And I've had several. This next one here is one of my favorites. And this is ivory. It's dated 1709, and the handle screws off, and there's a little cup inside, and you can see the holes in the cap. And I consider this my most important cane because it's a doctor's pomander, and that the doctor would put a solution in a sponge in that little cup, and as they walked in the sick room,
they would put it up to their nose. In fact, here's a picture of a Royal Dalton plate that I bought with a doctor having his pomander up to his nose. And the solution in that pomander is the solution of the four thieves. During the bubonic plague of France, 4 men went into a room where they threw all the dead bodies and they robbed them of all their valuables, because all they did was throw them in there and they just left them. And these 4 men went in, and when they were caught, they said, "How did you keep from getting sick?" "Well, we smelled this special solution." "Well, tell us what it is." "Not unless you let us go and let us keep all the things we stole." And so for 150 years, doctors have carried the solution of the 4 thieves in their pomander canes as they went into the sick room. They didn't know how it worked, but it worked. And it was, anybody guess what base was in it? The primary material?
Alcohol.
Hmm?
Alcohol.
No, but you're close.
Vinegar.
Vinegar. And that's where you also get the name vinaigrette. But vinaigrette really is not really a vinegar base. It may have been in the beginning, but in Victorian times, the most difficult thing about living in the 1800s was the smell. There was no deodorant. And so people typically smelled. So they put perfume in those canes that had covers. So pomander is open, doctors, and one with a cover that they can open and then smell it had perfume, and that kept it from getting, you know, and primarily, so in women and men of money, because they were made in gold, they were made in silver, made in all kinds of things. And then this is a typical violin cane made in Austria about 1850. I recently sold that for $10,000. And that would be a common one. And the bow is put in the back of the half of it, and the handle is a tow handle. It goes against your neck. And so bandmasters, Joshua Heifetz carried one of these all of his life. And this is typical of the gold-headed presentation canes that were made only in America. And these ones have some little extra things with some cameos on top. The one on the left is an agate cameo, and that's the expensive ones. If you want an expensive cameo, buy stone. The only problem is today, the only stone cameos that they're primarily making that you saw in Venice were made with laser, where these are hand-carved. The one on the top with the housing scene, that's made from seashell, which is typical of what the faces are. And if you want to know the difference between an old cameo and a new cameo, is the new cameos have pointed noses. The old cameos had a rounded one like the one on the left. And then the farther back they go, the less prettier they are. This was the first sink ever made in the world for indoor plumbing. And this is in the half bath. And if you look at that sink, the faucet on top is original. The 2 controls on the left and right are the only things that's not original about that. If you look in the bottom of the sink, there's no drain, because there was almost no indoor plumbing. And so this was about 1860. Next you will see here that you pick up on the lip and it tips. And that's how you pour the water out below. And then of course you can see a close-up of the faucet that's original, polished and lacquered, and then the 2 faucets on the side. And then the bathroom window that goes out to the swale. This is the bridge from the bedrooms on the 2nd floor so that you can see the swale. In the basement is a juke box. Ice cream bar dated 1949, and that's enameled, so that color will never change. And I bought a whole marble drugstore back in the 70s, and they were going to take and put this as a face to it to update it. Well, I sold the marble drugstore when I bought it, and these were in a box, and I put them in a barn. I said, this is exactly what the kids would like, and so that's where the kids had all their parties. And then, of course, every day I see deer, they come and they look in the window. And I'll just show you these. This is a movie poster, and I have several of them in the house, and every one of them were made the year I was born, 1944. That's why I kept them. Van Johnson came to Michigan to be in a play once, and so I even saw him act. Well, this is, you know, far older than that. And then another guest bedroom with the brass bed that is more ornate than most of them. And then every day the